Hello everyone, Chris Redeye here from Apricot Online. I'm just going to be explaining the panels on the left hand side to you, taking over from Amy. So the first panel, on the top left, is the audio and video channel. You will use the talk button to talk to your students and the video button to stream video, although generally we'd prefer if you didn't do this as it uses a lot of bandwidth and can degrade the signal. Now to talk to your students you will simply hit the talk button and it will then begin streaming your voice. If your microphone is not working, you can come up here to the top right hand side and click this icon, the audio wizard, which will then come up and you can select your speakers and your microphone. One more thing, if you're not streaming video it might be good to minimize the audio and video panel to give yourself some more room in the chat and in the participants panel. Now in the participants panel we have these 4 buttons here. The first one is simply emoticons, which are generally used by the students. You won't actually have time to use those yourself. You will have the away button. A student will use this to let you know that they are away from the keyboard. They generally won't say anything or give a reason because it'll obviously be an emergency, but you'll have to wait for them to come back. There'll also be the hands up button. If a student needs your attention or they have a question for you, they'll let you know by pinging you with this button. It makes a sound when it is pressed, and there'll be a number to associate which student went first. So obviously 1, that student went first, 2, 3, and it goes up. The 4th button is actually polls. So you can hold polls for your students to complete as a question. So you could pose a question asking students which colour they like best, red, blue or green. Now in this format yes or no would not be an appropriate answer. So in the participants panel we have the options menu here, which I'll go into, and then I'll go to polling type and I'll choose A to C, which now changes the poll type to 3 separate options, which are A, B and C. So that could be red, blue or green. You'd have to label them accordingly, so red would be A, blue would be B, so on and so forth, and then they would choose and you would be shown what they have chosen, and you would get to see what each individual student has also chosen. So I have chosen B. I'm going to ask Amy now to go choose an answer.
Okay.
Amy prefers green apparently. So there you go. I can now see I have selected B, Amy has selected C, and I have a tally at the top here. Once the poll is done, I may go to publish responses to whiteboard and get a small graph of what everyone has chosen. I can then press delete to remove it once I'm done and come to the tally section and click clear, and the poll will be done. Past this we have permissions here. Now these are my individual permissions. So I have microphone, camera, speech, which is for the chat. The pen is for the whiteboard, it allows me to change things as I please. The overlap screens are for screen sharing, which most moderators will have, which I'll get to later, or Amy has already talked about actually. And then we have web tour permissions. Web tour and screen sharing is disabled by default for students. You can turn it on globally, but this is not advised. If you have a student who has something on their screen that they want to show you, you can give them their individual permissions. So I'm here, these are my permissions, I have all the permissions, and these are the permissions that Amy are using at the moment. She does not have application sharing, so I'm going to click it, and she can now do application sharing. If there was a 3rd student, they would not gain the ability to do this. Moving on, go into the chat. The chat is just generally used to communicate with your students. A lot of them won't like to use their microphones. They're either shy, or the microphone might not be set up properly, or they might not find it comfortable. There'll be a mirage of reasons, but generally they'll stick to the chat. It's quite easy to communicate with them there. Most of them are quite fast typers as well, so it won't use too much time. As well as text, they have access to, again, generalized emoticons. And if you come to the top of the panel, there's an options menu here which allows you to control certain settings, so you can increase the font size or decrease it if you feel it's taking up too much room.
Let's take that off.
Where?
Yeah, let's take this check mark off of show my private chats. This is because a student might want to have a private communication with the teacher. It could be of a personal nature, or maybe they just don't want anyone else to know their answer because they're afraid of getting it wrong in front of other people. So they might chat to you privately. Move your cursor down here. Those extra tabs will show up there. Right, and that's where you can see chats that students are having with you privately, not in the main chat room.
Yeah.
Cool, go ahead. Go ahead.
So, other than that, a few options you can control are event messages, which generally don't happen unless it's something like a published URL, which you talked about earlier. And you can disable the emoticons if you feel they're distracting, so students can no longer place these. Talk about something else.